following is a presentation of Unidentified Entertainment and 22nd Century Radio, Manassas, Fairfax, Washington, D.C.
Exopolitics and Ufology, Religion and Science, Time and Space. Hosted by Mike Smith.
You call that a knife? This is a knife.
That's not a knife, that's a spoon.
All right, you win. I see you've played knifey-spoony before.
Nice work, everyone.
Well, it's easy for him. He's a cute little lizard. Gecko, actually. With all due respect, if I was tiny and green and had a British accent, I'd have more folks paying attention to me, too. I mean, save money. Pip cheerio.
British? I thought you were Australian.
Well, it's funny you should ask, because actually, I'm from...
That's a lovely accent you have. New Jersey?
Austria.
Austria? Well then, good day, mate. Let's put another shrimp on the barbie.
Let's not.
This is VIP. Don't just let anybody into my VIP area, okay?
Hey, Satan, you got a little problem.
What?
Somebody showed up in a crocodile hunter costume. It's really offending some of the other guests.
Oh, jeez. Hey, hi, listen, dude. You know, the whole crocodile hunter thing, it's just a little soon, you know? I mean, he just died a few weeks ago, and it's just not super cool. You gotta leave.
But it's me, Satan. Steve Irwin. I am the crocodile hunter.
Oh, but then, dude, no costume. Sorry, you gotta go.
Wait, I thought we were friends!
Oh, hey, Sinatra.
For your information, my revenue stream currently generates $2 million a year in charitable contributions for my community.
Hot damn.
And why am I in this movie? Maybe I just knew I had to represent. Because they had one good part in for a black man, they gave it to Crocodile Dundee.
Pump your brakes, kid. That man's a national treasure.
I just wanted to throw another shrimp on you, Barbie.
That ain't funny.
I'm sorry a dingo ate your baby.
You know that's a true story. Lady lost a kid. You about to cross my line.
Man, I'm sick of this koala hugging this.
For 400 years, that word has kept us down.
What the?
Took a whole lot of time just to get up that hill. Now we up in the big leagues. Kid, and I'll turn it back. Long as I live, it's you and me, baby.
That's the theme song for the Jeffersons. You really need help.
And just because the theme song don't make it not true.
Now, back to Time and Space with your host, Mike Smith.
Hello. Hey. Thanks, man.
I'm blaming Aaron's connection.
Yours does sound better than his. I assume you guys are sitting there with each other.
No, we're...
No, different locations.
Oh, fair enough. Let me try to get into just a little bit of the disclosure issue, and I mention it because I had the good fortune to go to X Conference last year, which is held actually just a few miles from here, with Steve Bassett, and while disclosure is one thing, exopolitics is sort of another thing. I'm just kind of wondering if you guys have an opinion on either of those subjects.
Well, we've discussed disclosure recently on the show,
yes.
And we're both kind of in different minds on what's going to happen. I'm on the kind of the side that we're not going to see disclosure ever from the group that's in power now, because as we said before, the group that's in power now, for them to disclose this information on UFOs, which will include information on new technologies, it'll essentially dissolve their power structure. So I'm in the camp of saying that we won't see any official disclosure from these groups or from any kind of government group, especially the United States, until there's some major event that forces them to. So that could include mass sightings on a worldwide scale, or
right.
also landings in daylight or something similar to that.
Right. And how about you, Aaron?
Well, I tend to slightly disagree, but I think that, it will happen. I just don't know why, but I think that eventually something will have to happen. You can't keep secrets forever. But if it's 50 years from now, 100 years from now, it's going to happen. The problem is, I think that the population won't be able to handle it. I just think that we go along as in our little world, and we just don't worry about things. And all of a sudden, if there's this sudden disclosure that we have alien contact, people are going to get scared. And I think we might adjust to it, but I think it would cause worldwide panic. I mean, you look at when there was a radio report back in the 1930s of an alien invasion. I think it was the H.G. Wells on Halloween radio broadcast.
Right.
And, you know, it caused widespread panic. And I don't think even in the 21st century there's going to be any different.
I think that's probably I can't decide which of the two of you I agree with more. I think there's also the footnote to point out that Project Blue Book, which I guess was terminated around 1970, in a way was sort of a disclosure by the U.S. would put them kind of out in front of everybody. So, there's some people who are sitting around asking, what is it we're waiting for, because they've already released information. The other thing to keep in mind, I think, is, at least over here, what appears to be a very serious resurgence of what you might call a new space race or even a new moon race. We seem to be seeing news stories on a very frequent basis about discoveries in the solar system, the moons, the moon of Europa, the oceans. There was a very interesting story a couple of weeks ago about that, the big ring that was discovered around Saturn that apparently nobody had ever noticed before.
Was it the invisible one that they discovered?
Yeah. Yeah. Some of these are really mind-blowing stories, and of course, we're busy crashing probes into the moon for whatever reason to, stir up a dust cloud and see what we can find in it. There just seems to be something going on constantly, and to really just go off the edge into a little bit of a conspiracy theory, I'm just wondering if you've ever heard of what Joseph Farrell writes about in some of his books about the two space program hypothesis, the idea that there's a NASA that everybody sees and then maybe sort of another secret program beneath that. Have you ever heard that or hear anything about it?
Well, I really like that idea, and if we can happily prescribe to the theory that there are these secret kind of power groups and they have captured UFO technology that is perhaps extraterrestrial and they have reverse engineered it into other craft, then the idea that NASA is trying to, and these other space agencies are trying to blast their way out of the atmosphere with these this outdated propellant technology of rockets, it's just silly. I mean, why would you go ahead with that kind of old technology if you had these anti-gravity craft that can supposedly go through wormholes and travel through time and space and different dimensions? It would make sense for NASA to just be, some sort of front for that kind of stuff.
Right. I from what I had read in Farrell's work, it was an interesting theory. He presents several different variations of it in one of the books that I had read. And I'm still kind of absorbing it. I don't know whether to believe it or not, but there's an interesting argument for it.
It's funny to bring up Gary McKinnon again, but didn't he find a document that had a list of agents?
I think I heard that on your show, yeah.
CIA agents, yeah. And in this list of agents, it had their locations, and there was a particular part of the list that said non-terrestrial.
Right.
As in they're on another planet.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I mean, that would suggest that there are, already agents throughout space. And recently on the show, we've heard as wild and far-out theories that, the CIA has bases on Mars and stuff like that. And like I said to you before, I love this stuff because it's such a great story. It's so entertaining to hear.
I remember listening to you guys talk about that just a couple of weeks ago. I forget which one of your newer episodes you discuss it in, but I also wanted to throw in the footnote that I thought I had heard somewhere that there was a benefit concert being put on by none other than David Gilmour of Pink Floyd to help Gary McKinnon and I guess help fund his defense in trying to keep from being extradited back to the United States to face all these charges you're discussing.
Well, I hadn't heard that. That's really cool.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty
I
interesting.
feel sorry for the guy because he wasn't really hacking. All he was doing was trying default usernames and passwords, and because the military had just left them wide open. I mean, there wasn't really anything amazingly clever he was doing. He was just kind of snooping around.
I find that real hard to believe that there's a bunch of privates and ensigns out there that are forgetting to change default passwords. In such a huge network, you got to imagine that somebody did it wrong. So. Yeah, and I also think I heard that he was one of he actually saw literally maybe a dozen or so other people hacking into the same computers at the same time that he was, and why he was isolated. But
they're pursuing him really hard. It's really unusual. Like, they're really pursuing him, and it makes me wonder why it's so important. Because worse things are done, and they're really hammering him.
Thou doth protest too much. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
You really know your stuff, Mike. I think we should have you on our show.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate that. I can point to a specific moment, which I won't bore you with at this time, but about 10 years ago, when I sort of the light bulb went on. I had been a casual fan as I'd grown up of some science fiction and interesting stuff, and never had made any of these connections that some of this stuff could even be real. And the minute that the light bulb went on, I have just absorbed book after book, and so I'm as interested in it as you are. I just don't think I can put the time in. I've got kids and a couple of jobs, and I just I do what I can, but.
I mean, that's the thing with the whole UFO topic, though, is that debunkers come out and they immediately try and ridicule the whole idea. But and they ask if they always split people into believers and non-believers, and the whole concept of being a believer in the UFO phenomenon is really stupid to me, because you just need to look at the information there, and there's no issue of being a believer or not. There's just information that is clearly worth a look.
Yes.
And it clearly shows that the phenomenon is real and deserves further study.
As I heard another podcast host, I don't know if you're familiar with a guy named Jesse Randolph, but I'd heard him make the remark that he has people come to him and ask him, show me the evidence, make me a believer. And he says to them, look, I can't do that, but if you give me 3 or 4 hours of time and allow me to sit down with you and run you through some videos and show you some books, I can point you in the right direction, and you can make your own mind up. But